So welcome to our session, and we go to the next slide. This workshop is hosted by the Community of Practice on Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning. So this is what MEL stands for, the Community of Practice on Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning for think tanks in the frames of On Think Tanks. And we've been working together for the past couple of months, and we'll learn more about this later. And this session will be hosted in particular by 4 persons, and we have, instead of Dina Lomovsky today with us, Stephan Paulsen. And I'm going to start us off. I'm Claire. I'm heading the Impact and Innovation Lab at the German Council on Foreign Relations. We are co-hosting this conference, and we are very happy to be part of it with this session and several others. But this one is on MEL, the only one on MEL. And I'm handing over to my colleague, Rebecca.
Thanks, Claire. Yes, I am Rebecca. I am the Manager of Strategic Initiatives at the R Street Institute, and very excited to be with you all here today. And I'll hand over to Sarine.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Sarine Karajerjian. I am part of the Haysam Fares Institute for Public Policy at the University of Beirut, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
And Stephan, do you want to say a word about yourself as well? Okay. We just leave it at that, I guess. Yep. Stephan will support us with tech, etc. And that's very kind of him, because Dina, our co-host of the Community of Practice, can't be here with us at the moment. So I think we can go to the next slide, and I'll hand over to Rebecca.
Indeed. Thank you. So welcome to the session. Just to check we're all in the right place. This is about monitoring, evaluation, and learning as a force for change. Very glad to have you all here today. So what we're really going to be doing today is looking at the work that we've done as a community of practice, the learnings that we've discovered together, and sharing those with you. We're going to be talking about how we can apply those learnings to our own organizations, not only in terms of the programs that we deliver, but the actual changes that we're trying to achieve organizationally. This is going to be an interactive workshop. We're not going to be standing here, well, virtually, talking at you all the whole time. We really encourage everyone to make use of the chat. We'll have the opportunity to have conversations with each other, and it is very much about learning with each other. So I encourage everybody to get involved. Back to you, Claire.
Yes, and this is exactly how we want to get started. And on the next slide, you can see a question that we have to all of you who are joining us here. We can see we're 16 people in the room. So please share with us the MEL questions, challenges, and or aspirations that brought you to this session today. So why are you joining? Were you just curious what the M and the E and the L stand for, or did you bring with you some concrete questions, challenges? So please share in the chat with us whatever brought you here. Okay, so I think we'll just go on, but please do write your questions here that you want to see answered maybe, or that you'd like to learn more about in our session today. While we go on a little bit. So about the Community of Practice on an MEL. It was launched in August 2020, so about like 8 months ago, I guess. And it was facilitated by Dina Lomovsky from Southern Hemisphere and me. Many of you might know Dina, especially if you've joined previous OTT conferences. She's an evaluation professional working with think tanks, but also NGOs and other civil society organizations. And me, I've introduced myself already. And we've joined this community of practice as a place where we met once per month to discuss questions such as how can think tanks become learning organizations, what are challenges, trends, and good practices in MEL for think tanks, and how can think tanks learn better from and with each other and reflect upon our practice as an industry. And with monitoring, we mean how we can systematically see and build a database about our work, and see what works and what doesn't work. With evaluation, it's ex post, so we look back and we see what worked, and we try to improve our work based on this evidence from previous projects, for example. And learning is like the more general approach in an organization. How do we make a knowledge about what works, what doesn't work available to other colleagues and other programs and other units of our organizations? Are there systematic reflection sessions taking place, or some kind of written documentation of learning? So all of this complex, which makes a learning organization tick. And what we did was to share good practices. We identified frontiers and also potentials of organizational learning for think tanks. Every time we had a different topic, and this was the first time. The past month was the first time that we had this community going, and we will say more in the end if you're interested to join, how we might want to go forward. And I see that in the chat we've had some questions. Sarine shared with us that she wanted to learn about MEL techniques. Hi, Sarine, you're also part of the COP. Then Stephan is curious about what makes MEL different for think tanks than for other organizations. I'm not sure if we can answer this question today, but we'll see. I'm curious to see what you think afterwards. I guess you're an expert yourself as well. And Mason would like to hear about automation of MEL for business analytics. Okay, that's a big one as well. So we'll see how much we can go into that. Rebecca.
Yes, Stephan, if you can move on. Oh, I'm getting an echo. That's fun. So let's start with what we've learned as a community of practice so far, and just keep going, Stephan. On to the next one. Yep. So let's start with the challenges. Guess what? We share a lot of the same challenges, and maybe Stephan, this will start to answer that question about what makes MEL different from think tanks than other organizations, because maybe it isn't. So some of the things that we identified were that challenge of the value that we place on monitoring, evaluation, and learning. You know, there's that tension between it being a compliance exercise to make donors happy, often donors who want different things in different templates, even though it's the same information, versus sense making, actually being able to do that learning component from the information that we're gathering. We also looked at, to identify that knowing the right questions to ask can be quite a challenge, and knowing how best to answer them. It was really interesting. So we'll talk later about the tools that we've used within our community of practice to have experiential learning about different approaches. But there were times when our colleagues would bring questions that we would work through together about their MEL approaches. And when we looked into them further, we realized that the real concern wasn't so much about which tool to use, as opposed to the value that monitoring, evaluation, and learning had within the organization, or the commitment to using information within the organization. And this was part of that component that led us to this conversation about, well, how do we actually use MEL as a force for change? Relatedly, there is this issue of monitoring and evaluation and learning not being prioritized organizationally in terms of the time it's given, the attention it's given in terms of the data and recommendations that might be pulled together, or the actual staffing, the bodies to do it, or the staff time to do that. And then the last one, I'm sure, is going to come in as absolutely no surprise to anyone, is the challenge of measuring think tank outcomes and impact. It feels like a perpetual challenge, and certainly we engaged with that issue. So I'm just curious, and again, please use the chat to share your feedback. Do these challenges resonate with you? Are there other challenges that you think that think tanks share that you think others might have in common? I'll just give a moment for people to share their feedback. And while we're doing that, I'll just hand back over to Claire to move on to the next slide.
Yes, so okay, some people just needed a bit more time. So Christina just wrote that these definitely resonate with her. And Stephen says from his experience, the fourth bullet point probably is the most characteristic for think tanks. And Dina's here as well. Hi, Dina. Great, you could join us. So think tank outcomes are particularly hard to measure because policy is often so opaque. Yeah, so this is really a challenge that we have. And I have to say, even though I've been interested in this topic for quite some time now and working on it, it's still often not really clear to me how exactly we would be able as think tanks to track our impact and our outcomes. And I thought it was really interesting also to follow this scaling session earlier today, which pulled together some new developments in this sphere. And I think it also really depends on the type of policy that your think tank is working on. So I think for development, for example, it might be easier than for other kinds where you don't really have maybe that clear outcomes beyond discourse. So, for example, my organization is in foreign policy, and it's very hard to say what kinds of impact we might have except on information level or discourse level. But we can't really, say, okay, this and that policy in another country we changed. Okay. So we do not only share many of the same challenges, but also we found that we do actually have expertise, even if we're not experts. So just as I said, we found that it's often the case in think tanks that we are not in specific MEL roles. So all of us, had to, or the most of us have to fulfill several roles at the same time. Many of us are researchers with like 50% their position, and then like another like 20 or 30% or 50% for MEL. So this is seems to be, at least in our group, quite a normal thing. So of course we cannot have the same expertise as like a person who works like as a 100% evaluator. But still, we found that we all have something to contribute to each other's MEL journeys, especially because we are immersed in think tank work ourselves and we experienced it firsthand. Also, we found that MEL expertise is actually inherent within think tanks. So not only us, but also other colleagues. We are a bunch of researchers, communicators, engagement experts. So what more do we need than exactly this? We just need to apply our skills to not only watching policymakers and policy and what does it, yield as an outcome, but also watching our own work and see, okay, research data about what we do, communicate it in a way that, for example, funders or just ourselves, our teams need, and also engage, of course, stakeholders in this. So actually everything that we know and that we know how to do it, we can just apply more to our own work. And if we go to the next slide, there's also something that we found in our COP, and you see that it was a little bit of self-research or self-help group that we were there. So what we noticed in the community of practice was that MEL has effects on so many levels of an organization. So if we talk about MEL as a force for organizational change, it is really happening on so many levels. So if we evaluate a project that we've done, we learn, we gain new competencies. So if we evaluate a project, for example, that we've done, we can gain new competencies. We can increase the impact of our programs by changing the program design. So actually changing not only ourselves, but also our projects and programs, and also our organizational culture and strategy by the way we talk about our work and reflect together and create spaces where we can talk about the work we are doing, why we are doing it, what works, what doesn't work. So this also has an effect on organizational culture and strategy. And then if we include stakeholders, then also it has an effect on stakeholder relations, because we might educate our funders or just take in their their ideas about what they want to achieve and how we can best achieve it, and then engage in it together. So this is really also a layer that can be affected by employing MEL methods and tools. And then last but not least, of course, it's also having an impact on our impact, because it can really change the way we relate to the world, to our stakeholders, to our audiences, and really affect policy change, hopefully better than if we didn't analyze our projects more. Rebecca.
Thank you. And we'll just move on. Excellent. So we've done all this thinking, but we've also done lots of learning from each other, sharing tools and approaches that can support us in our monitoring, evaluation, and learning work. Some examples are the case clinic approach. I'm not going to talk about that much too deeply because, as I mentioned, we have an experiential learning part to this session, and Claire is going to be taking us through that later on. We use the retrospective starfish, which is a great tool for being able to organize and understand our learning and look at how we put it into practice. I have an example on the next slide, so you'll be able to see more there. We talked about learning exchanges, so actually having formal opportunities to bring stakeholders together and talk about the learnings that have happened through our different monitoring and evaluation and learning processes, and being able to share those successes and those failures within a formal environment and dedicate time to that. There was the 1, 2, 4 all approach. This was a way of encouraging self-reflection and shared reflection. So starting with a question, which we reflect on ourselves, then we work with another person to think together and share our own thoughts, broadening that out to 4 people, and then bringing a whole group together. So there's a really peer learning opportunity in order to gain insights on the question at hand. And then the last thing we looked at most recently was making MEL fun. Now, confession, we don't actually have all of the answers to that one. Sorry. But it was a really, really great discussion that we did have. And I'm going to ask Stephan to move on to the next slide here. Excellent. So I mentioned the reflective starfish. So we're to think about how we make MEL more MEL fun. We went through the 1, 2, 4 all process of thinking of our own ideas and sharing our ideas with a partner, a group of people, and then all together. This represents the different ideas that we came up with about, okay, fun might be a step too far, but at least making it more engaging. And I'd love you just to have a look through and see all of these ideas that we came up with about what we could do more of, what we could keep doing, what we could start doing, and what we could stop doing. Now, this is not a roadmap for every single organization or every single individual carrying out MEL. Personally, I saw Excel spreadsheets stop doing and kind of balked because that's my thing. It's about sharing different approaches and understanding how we might tailor them to the different needs of the organization. And Mazen, I noticed that you were talking about automation of analysis, and that was certainly something that came out as something to keep doing for example, using bots to gather data and being able to help collate information. That simplification was certainly a general theme that came out in terms of how we can make MEL more engaging. But looking at this, taking a step back, I literally just physically did that, and looking at this, when we think about it, we take out the concept of MEL. Actually, if we think about change and organizational change, many of these ideas actually are also very relevant. So I'm going to just transition on and start our conversation about how we use our learnings about monitoring, evaluation, and learning to actually support organizational cultural change. Stephan, if you could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So again, I have a question for you, and you can speak, you can put it in the chat. I just want to hear from you all. So we talked before about the MEL questions, challenges, and aspirations that brought you here today. And my question to you is, how do these connect with a need or a desire for organizational, potentially culture change of think tanks? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Again, either through the chat or just jumping in. Although everyone seems really interested in the idea of fewer spreadsheets from the looks of it. So just Mazen, thank you. Mazen is lifting up how they are closely connected to organizational culture and focusing on doing less, more impactful work, focusing more on the quality of the work over the quantity of work in order to drive collaboration. And Justina, yes, quality over quantity. I should fess up that these are my colleagues, and so I know exactly what they're getting at, which is why I can translate. But it's great. These are all great points, and if there are others who have thoughts on how these connect, it'd be really great to hear. But in the meantime, we'll just keep moving on to the next slide.
Maybe I can add a part about the Excel spreadsheet point. I think, I mean, the numbers or words in spreadsheets, they're just data, and maybe you're familiar with this ladder of where you start with data, but data is not information, and information is not knowledge. You know, so the question is, where are we on this line? Are we just collecting data and then, you know, it's sitting in some file and nobody's interested? Or are we actually able to make the jump to the data that we collect, having you know, a feedback loop in the organization, actually having an effect on how we do our work? Will we change the way we work in the future because we know more about what worked and what doesn't work? And I think it's exactly about this, like how can we you know, walk up the ladder from data to information to knowledge, and actually up the quality basically of what we know about our work.
Thank you, Claire. That was an excellent lead-in to this slide. So I wanted to share an example of how we at my organisation have used a monitoring and evaluation and learning approach to be able to strengthen organisational culture and change it. So we all know 2020 was an incredibly difficult year. We were thrust into a remote working environment, which had huge implications, not only for the way we work and the way we're able to produce work, but for the culture of our organisations. So this is an example of how we were able to use data to actually support that transformation, and not only in terms of the work, but also supporting staff. Following the initial decisions that were made to adapt, we conducted a staff survey to understand how people were doing, how people were coping with the change, and really give us a baseline of information. Following that, we had bi-weekly to monthly staff surveys, which kept checking in on how staff were doing. This enabled us to monitor for areas of concern, evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions that we were developing and implementing in order to better support staff and our ways of working, and then make further decisions based on the feedback that we were getting from staff, either about what we should continue, if there are additional mitigations that we should put in place, and so forth. So that was really about the learning and the implementation of that learning in practice. That proved to be incredibly effective. We were able to maintain and strengthen our organisational culture through this time, despite the many challenges that we and everyone else were facing. what this also meant, and to come back to Claire's point, is that we now have an incredible data set that we can use in other ways as we look to develop the organisation in other facets. And again, it's about that baselining data to be able to see where there might be further points of evolution or points of change as we continue to strengthen the organisation. So now I'm going to hand over to Claire for our experiential learning piece.
Yes, so one thing we know about learning, and this is the L in MEL, is that it's best being done experientially. So there's this is also backed by science and evidence-based, because human beings are wired to understand best new information if they have actually experienced it, instead of just, you know, us lecturing you about it or visual prompts like our slides, but actually having the experience also centrally. So what we wanted to do is we chose one of the methods that we used in our group, the case clinic approach, to actually invite you to be part of this experience, and also give you the chance to actually put one like a case or a challenge that you've experienced yourself that's connected to MEL in your organization, to bring it here into this group. We are 20 people here, so not only us, but also all the other participants, and we can help you develop some a different perspective on your case. So this approach is called Case Clinic, and it's coming from coaching, actually. And we'd need someone, and this can be anyone here who's here in this session at the moment, so 22 people, who'd like to bring in a challenge that they want advice on. So we saw quite a number of interesting challenges that you shared in the chat with us, but also maybe there are more of those that you haven't really shared yet, and who maybe just write it in the chat or ask to share a video and audio on the button in the upper right corner. So if you would like to have your challenge up for discussion. And while you might be still thinking if you want to be receive this peer advice for your MEL challenge, I'll just run you through how it works to give you a bit more thinking time. So first step, it always follows these 6 steps. So you have a very clear and structured run through. The first step is that the case owner introduces their case. They explain to us what is the situation at hand, how would you like to use this group today. And the second step is for all of us, the peers, to ask clarification questions. So basically we ask, what do we have to know about the case to be able to give you meaningful advice? The third step is focus. So again, after this clarification, to help you focus and formulate one question to receive peer advice on, because often we come into such a setting and we have like a big, you know, question mark, and if we dig a little deeper, we find that there's maybe, you know, a more pressing issue that's behind it. And then at that point, basically you can lean back, the case owner can lean back, and you can turn off in an online setting, you can turn off your camera and your audio. In a live setting, you would just turn around your chair so you wouldn't face the group anymore. And then it's up to the group to actually come up with hypotheses and then ideas about your case. So why hypotheses? This is because, we're normally, all of us have fantasies about a situation, and we make assumptions about what we've just heard. For example, the origins of your problem that you've shared with us, or the people involved. And in order to acknowledge this and make this transparent, we have this step where we share hypotheses, these assumptions and fantasies about your case. And only then we go into brainstorming solutions. And the case owner can just enjoy and, you know, take notes if they want to. and just listen to what others make of their case. And then the last step is that, of course, the case owner returns and has the chance to, harvest some of it, share some of their takeaways for their work. So now I've given you some more time, and please, who would like to share a challenge that they would like to have peer advice on? So this is really in the spirit of how we worked in a community of practice, that everybody could bring in a case, where we had a case from Berlin, we had a case from London, from different think tanks who said, okay, this is something I'm struggling with at the moment, with evaluation, and here is a bunch of evaluation nerds, and we can have them have a look at it.
You know what, Claire? We could probably shape something around this quality quantity discussion. A few people have chipped in there. I think we could look at that. Yeah, and also the Excel sheet. I think it's also interesting. So, what is actually the function of this? Why is it a problematic? Why do people hate it? That's and some people love it. We know that about you, but it seems that some people don't like it. So would those who mentioned this, okay, yeah, so why don't you come up to stage and just let us know a little bit more about your case. Hi, Justina. So are you where are you working? What are you working on in general?
So I work at the Art Street Institute with Rebecca. And so the question that I had posed was really around, the fact that it's so much easier to do quantitative measurement, and that it's particularly hard to measure a qualitative outcome. From my perspective, I feel like then quantitative metrics are.
So I think, Justina, what you were saying was that the upshot of quantitative measures being easier to gather means that we put more emphasis on quantitative information over the qualitative information and the qualitative work as well. Would that be accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So now we can ask. Do you want to give some more background information on this? Like, how do you deal with that so far at our Street Institute? What's the situation, and what would you like to use this group for today?
Sure. I mean, I think what we've tried to date is to emphasize both. That we haven't done away with quantitative metrics, even though they aren't always the most accurate measurement, right? I think one thing I'd love to understand better is how to separate outputs from outcomes, or if that's just an impossible task to undertake.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, but I think this is one of the challenges where sometimes I feel it goes just down to formulation, just like the way you phrase things. It could count as an output or an outcome, but probably there are smarter ways to do so. So what else do you want us to know about this, and what would you like to use this group for today? Is there any question in particular that you brought with us to us today?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that was sort of the main question I had, was really how if outputs end up becoming sort of the outcomes, then I mean, I think that's okay in some instances. How do you then put up guardrails around people wanting to just do more? Right, that if outputs are the measurement, then if I do 25 of something versus my peers who are only doing 5, then that should mean I'm doing better. But we all know that that's not always the case. I guess if there are guardrails or any recommendations that you have around that would be fantastic.
So how to bring more quality quality measurement into think tank evaluation, basically. Yeah, absolutely. So what other clarifications do any of you have that can be you here on the panel, like Sarine, Rebecca, Stephan, but also everybody else in the chat? So are there any questions you want to ask Justina? Is this like a case that to just understand Arstied's situation better and what they're working on at the moment? And thanks, Dina, for sharing some resources on MEL techniques. Okay, so then let's collect some more hypotheses. So we ask Justina now to switch off her camera and her mic and just listen to our conversation about her case. And yeah, I notice it's much easier if you can see everyone on camera than just having like most people in the chat listening in, but we'll try anyway. So please share any hypotheses, any fantasies that you have about the origins or the context of the problem that you've just heard. And
Stephan,
yeah.
would you be able to share the slides again, please, so everyone's got like the process in front of them as well,
yes,
please?
That's helpful. So we're in step 1 in the middle, so the second one, hypotheses, where we reflect about the case without Justina, influencing our thinking about it. So she's just eavesdropping in a way. And so one thing I thought was also that resonated very much with me was this observation that she shared, that whatever gets measured also seems to be valued in an organization. So if we measure outputs, then it also, sets an incentive for colleagues to strive for just do more of something, to, be on top of any quantitative list or ranking or whatever. And it also seems to put colleagues maybe, in competition to each other. But yeah, that's just an hypothesis. But I thought that might be the outcome of this kind of like more quantitative leaning approach. And I can totally understand why this is probably not where we should put the incentive as a think tank.
I've just seen Dina propose a hypothesis that the organisation has stronger qualitative skills than quantitative skills. I'd love to hear more about what you mean by that, Dina. Oh, sorry, other way around. Right. Stronger quantitative skills than qualitative skills. Right.
Okay, so this is why they jump to do the quantitative reporting first, because it's just closer to the skill set. Yeah, that's also something that you shared before, right, Mason? That it's that quantitative data is easier to measure. Yes, and it seems to be also leading a life of its own. I don't know if you've noticed, but also in policy, as soon as you have some kind of index out on something, everybody feels they have like an instrument in their hand. And it gets a life of its own, and all like the 100-page report behind this index, nobody reads it anymore.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. And I also think that one last thought that I had about the case was that the organization seems to really value impact, and they really want to see and value quality, and they are looking for better ways to reach this. So they're not happy with just measuring outputs, apparently. I think many organizations are fine with just say we have so many events per year, so many publications, but there seems to be, some kind of purpose, some kind of maybe passion to achieve something beyond that that leads this endeavor.
There are suggestions there from Stephan about clarifying that this might be a distinction between soft skills and hard skills, and that the latter, the hard skills, are often more valued. And And Dean has also suggested that the organisation has not selected key indicators to measure and actually collects too much data and focus on what is interesting rather than what is useful.
Yeah, I think that also hits close to home. I think this is really the danger when you look into indicators and you just like think, oh, that would be interesting to know and that would be interesting, and then in the end you have so much data to collect. Yeah. So okay, so we go further, and I think now is a very good time to do the brainstorming. And I'll set the timer for 5 more minutes, and we can go on. And Justina can just lean back and hope that there is some nuggets in there in our thinking for her.
So does anyone have any ideas about what could be strategies to address this issue? And again, please feel free to use the button to come and speak, or pop suggestions in the chat so everyone can see.
I think addressing also what Mason said before, really to maybe we need some similarly simple way to collect and display qualitative information. And I think one tool that I really like is this micro stories of change, because it's something that that gives sense to raw data. So it's really about people relaying, for example, how an event or a project has changed their lives, how it has changed their perspective about a certain topic. And, if you have something like this, for example, from a feedback sheet, from a survey, like a qualitative survey of participants, then this is really something you can capture. And then the next step is, of course, to find like a good way to maybe store it, and you can then do a keyword search, or also cluster it, categorize it in different ways. Maybe again, an Excel spreadsheet comes to mind, but maybe there are smarter ways to do so that others know. I know that there are like some really elaborate evaluation apps out, but I don't have any experience with that. So super happy to learn more if anybody's here who can share their experience.
I like what you're saying there, Claire, because it's almost like leaning into the qualitative emphasis, but also adding on that layer of I'm getting qualitative and quantitative mixed up now. So leaning into that quantitative emphasis and then layering on the qualitative piece to show how that adds value and really builds on where the organization's at in order to start to create that shift in thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone in my team also had a nice idea. It can be really simple things as that. So we had a workshop, and then some participants wrote us emails, and we were really, really amazed that people took the time to, write an email to us saying thank you and, like this about the workshop without us prompting them, So one of my team members suggested to actually save this email in some way. And I was also thinking, okay, this is really cool, because normally, these are like the really nice positive aspects, but we don't so far have a system for storing these. And I don't know if you know of any, but this is definitely a good way to also, do some testimonials for websites, etc. later on.
Hey, a simple Google Doc works for that. Copy and paste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Outcome journals, evidence boxes. Dina, do you want to come up and share some of your expert knowledge on those? Dina is really an evaluation professional in our group, so you can share this.
That's okay, Dina. That's absolutely fine. Now we all have homework to go and Google outcome journals, evidence boxes. I literally have just been Googling micro stories of change. And I've got to say, this is really indicative of the way the MEL community practice has worked, is really sharing these different tools and being able to go away and research and learn based on the information that gets shared in there. I'm really mindful of time, Claire, so should we perhaps move back to the thanks and harvesting?
Yes, and I just wanted to keep up one thing that Mason put in the chat. Let's not depend on qualitative metrics to be the impact metrics, and instead use them like social sciences research does as a way to explain the why and how to the quantitative metrics. I think that's a very good idea, to not have like a totally separate system or like choose qualitative over quantitative, but see, okay, we have so many events, and then see, you know, within this quantitative metrics of number of events, see, you know, how have they fared, like how did people like them, would they come back, etc. So this is a very classical approach also to understand more and better. And also focus groups, like if you're in a big evaluation, you can also do focus group interviews, or also when you're setting up a new project, just to learn more about the needs of the users and the participants. Okay, let's move on to thanks and harvesting. Justina, if you want to switch on your camera and your mic again, and just let us know, like maybe 1 or 2 things maximum. What do you take away for your work?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for all the suggestions. It was really nice. It was a really nice exercise, the sort of leaning back and just listening. I'd say one of the things I really liked hearing was it just sounds like such a simple solution that of just having a space to go to, right? And not that it necessarily has to be the exact same space that everyone goes to, but so I'll be brief. I love the idea of having a space to go to capture information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes lots of sense. I'll also Google that now. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And you've all experienced now a case clinic approach in action. So what we want to do is to summarize some of our experience with MEL and think tanks that we've learned in the community of practice. And we want to write a blog series for the OTT blog about it. And for this, we also want to know what's most interesting for you. So please let us know which topics you'd like to see covered in our upcoming blog series, MEL for Change, and share your own experiences with us. And I've just posted the poll in the chat. So please go there. It's just a minute of your time to share with us your ideas and what you'd like to, what you would like us to cover in the blog. Rebecca.
Absolutely. And if we'll just move along to the next one. So this has all been fantastic, and we're really enthused by everyone being here to join the conversation about monitoring, evaluation and learning. We are thinking of continuing the community of practice, and personally, I recommend it. I think it's been invaluable and I've certainly learned a lot. If you're interested, please pop your email address in the poll that Claire has shared, and save the date for Wednesday 19th of May from 2 till 3 p.m. CEST. So the last thing to say at 10 o'clock on the dot is thank you very much. This has been fantastic, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. And thanks very much to Justina for sharing your case and putting yourself here on the spot. It was very interesting. I think the case that you shared, and also in general what I learned about these case clinics, is that in almost any case, we can find aspects that are so relevant to our own organizations. Even though in the beginning it's the case of someone else, it becomes our own case throughout this case clinic approach. And that's why it's so valuable for learning as an approach. Thank you all for coming, and let us know what you want to learn in the blog. Bye.
Bye.